To another episode of Live with Littledata. This one was supposed to be pre-recorded, but I'm tuning in from vacation to talk to you all. This week we're going to look at attribution modeling in Google Analytics, a commonly discussed but rarely understood or hard to understand topic, and specifically looking at sort of data-driven attribution. So let me step into Google Analytics first of all and explain what we're talking about. So in any one of these reports in GA4, this is our user acquisition report. So looking at the channel group that bought the user, right? And we'll see if we scroll over here, conversions, all events. I mean, in this case, we only have purchases set up as conversions, so it's the same difference. But the simple question is, how does Google decide that a certain amount of revenue came from organic social or organic search? How is that? How are those sales? How's that revenue attributed to the channel group? And that's something that is quite an art. There's no precise answer to that. And in Google Analytics 4, we now have a different option to do that, which is called data-driven attribution. So first of all, let's look at how you might find out what attribution model you're using. So I go to the settings here, and under the property settings, I'm going to go to attribution. Now, this attribution setting affects all of the reports. It's something you make across the whole account, and it only affects reporting moving forward. So it doesn't change how the attributions were scored historically. It's just from how the conversions are split going forward. Now, this account is already set up to data driven. Traditionally, and in Google Analytics previously, the default was last click. So that meant that whatever was the last session that people came from, the last, in fact, specifically in Universal Analytics, it's called last non-direct click. So as long as we knew what the session was, we'd attribute to that. If it was direct or kind of unknown attribution, then we'd ignore that one. And there were a few other models you could play around with. Now, Google is basically deprecating these other models, linear, position-based, time decay, mainly because they don't really add much. They're too complex to understand for most users, and they're not actually better than last click. But they are now recommending data-driven, and so we'll come on to. I do believe that's better. So first of all, that's how you know what reporting attribution model is used. It's here under the attribution settings. So let's just unpack a little bit what an attribution model means, and I'll just share a different screen, which is this one. Right, hopefully you can see this slide. So let's think about a standard, well, not standard, but a kind of average e-commerce journey where there are basically three different campaigns that brought the user to purchase. So it starts off with a Facebook ad, which is effectively the first user acquisition. That's the first time they find out about your brand. It then gets reinforced by a Google ad. Maybe that's something retargeting, or maybe they just search for your brand name, having heard about it on Facebook. And then finally, now you've kind of got them on an email list, or they haven't purchased yet, you retarget them through Klaviyo, and there's then a user that's purchased from that Klaviyo campaign. Right, so what would last click attribution look like? In this case, the last click the user had before they bought was from Klaviyo, from an email campaign. So in last click attribution, Klaviyo gets 100% of the revenue. Like the user bought $200, all due to Klaviyo, which is pretty unfair because that is really just a result of you'd never have got them on your email list if it wasn't for the Facebook and Google ad campaigns. Okay, so we could have taken one of the old style models. I'll pick linear because it's very simple to understand. Linear would just have split the sale between them. So actually let's talk them in dollar terms. So $100 sale, $100 went to Klaviyo. So in this one, we've got $33 goes to each of them. Okay. maybe that's fair. But what if, in fact, as I said, the Google Ads was a branded search term? The user kind of already knew about your brand before then, so even if you hadn't shown them the Google ad, they probably would have found your search term organically anyway. And as I said, with Klaviyo, they kind of already about to purchase. It was just a little sort of kicker for some users. Well, data driven, and this isn't like a set split at all. Data driven would say, okay, well, what is the incrementality of these campaigns? If people had only seen the Facebook ads campaigns, what's the probability of them purchasing just on that? And if it's like a 70% probability, then I'll say, right, well, fine, Facebook ads bought $70 worth of that sale. Now, Google Ads didn't contribute nothing, but it's going to say, okay, quite a lot less, because we have occasions where the user only saw Google Ads, and that wasn't a very good acquisition campaign for us. It was really just a retargeting. And then, as I said, Klaviyo, not nothing, but $10, only 10% of the sale, because without the other two campaigns, they'd never got on an email list. And we know that users who only saw Klaviyo are, not going to purchase. Now, I'll flag up one basic problem here straight away, which is that this window of attribution, we'll come on to this in a short while, is only ever going to be over a couple of months. So you may well have acquired people on your email list a year ago through Facebook ads or some other channel. But if they come back, if within the period in Google Analytics, the last 90 days is the maximum they allow, they've not seen those clicks, then again, Klaviyo will get 100% of the sale. So it's still, data driven is still skewed somewhat towards what I call sort of owned channels, because it'll always see them as converting well. But it's certainly fairer than last click, and it's more scientific than linear. I hope that was clear. It is a difficult subject. I'll be writing a longer post in due course on that. So let's step back into Google Analytics and continue with the other attribution settings. So the second setting, which so first of all, I recommend that you change to data driven if you're not already there. It does take quite a volume of data to work out for your brand what's converting. But if you're doing more than, let's say, 1,000 orders a month, that's definitely enough data. If you're doing more than a few hundred orders a month, that's probably good enough. And either way, I think it's fairer than last click, because it will give some credit to those that are higher up the funnel. Okay, so the next setting I really do recommend you choose is this sort of bit of a sneaky one from Google. So they basically say in Google Ads, and this affects web conversion shared with Google Ads. If a user saw a paid search ad, but then saw some other things in between, Facebook and Klaviyo, let's use those as examples, do you want Facebook and Klaviyo to get any credit? And I would say the answer is yes, you do, because if you don't do that, then your Google Ads conversions are going to look incredibly rosy. It's going to look like you don't do any other marketing. Google's the only place that you spend, which is going to, basically inflate the importance of your PPC manager or your agency managing Google Ads. So I would say no. If you're going to target and calculate the return on investment in Google Ads, then at least consider all the organic channels and non-Google channels that you're there. Because when we say this isn't just paid, this is only Google paid channels. We want paid and organic. And then the final thing is the conversion window. So this is, as I said, how far back in time the touch points are eligible for attribution credit. So if it's a 30-day window, if the user clicked on one of your ads within the last 30 days before they bought, then it considers to is credited with the sale. Now, there's a couple of different parts there. I mean, with acquisition conversion events, if all you're targeting is bringing people to your website, then 30 days seems fine. I would say, though, that I hope you're not targeting on just paying traffic to get them to first visit. You want to be, paying them on purchases. So for all other conversion events, which includes purchases, this is the important setting here. Now, jury's out on this. Google recommends 90 days. That's 3 months. I mean, that does seem quite long for me to say, okay, did someone who saw an ad 3 months ago really come back and buy now? Kind of makes reporting a bit more complex. But on the other hand, it does account for what I would call sort of high consideration purchases. Kind of depends on your product. If you don't think that you have the kind of users, maybe you're selling quite a high an impulse purchase, the kind of thing that you wouldn't be considering for more than a few days, then maybe you want to switch to 30 days. If you're selling something like furniture or something that has a very high consideration, then 90 days is probably fair. So I'm going to keep it at 30 and 90 days here, or 90 days for the purchase event specifically. And I'm just going to save those settings. Now, there's one other aspect to attribution that's really important, and that is that for the data-driven model to work, we need to be able to link back those campaigns together. So if we go back to our little illustration here. So if the data-driven model is going to work, it needs to know that it was the same user who clicked on the Facebook ads, clicked on the Google ads, clicked on the Klaviyo. And by same user, it really means same browser with the same cookies, because that's traditionally how on an e-commerce site you can know that the user was the same. So it's really important that we get user identity right. If we're not managing to link together those different sessions, then we can't possibly attribute, we can only attribute the last click, basically. We can't possibly know that Facebook ads was linked to the purchase. Now on Meta's own platform, on Facebook, they can do that in a different way, and our Facebook Conversions API supports that, to be able to link back to a Facebook account or Instagram account rather than just based on cookies. But in Google's world, they don't have that ability. They've always, let's say, been a bit more privacy conscious. But they do have something that's super useful called Google Signals, and I highly recommend you set it up. So we want the next tab up here, the settings for reporting identity. Now, there's at a high level 2 different reporting identity sessions. So blended, which uses some model data, and observed that only uses observed data that is actually measured from the browser. Now, I haven't heard of any reason why there's a downside to blended. It just uses one extra, let's say, 4th way of linking users together, which is only going to fill in the gap. So I don't see any reason really why you should switch to observed, and blended is the default. So let me explain the order of events. We'll just make this a little bigger. Right. So the first thing, if you tell Google Analytics that it is a particular user ID, and typically for most brands, we use a Shopify customer ID, something that is unique for that customer on your Shopify store, then it'll link them together based on that user ID. So that's the most reliable way. Unfortunately, the majority of users on e-com stores are not logged in until they get to the checkout. So there's no way of linking. You can link together people who actually buy on different devices, but there's no way of linking together people browsing on one device with purchasing on another. And that's a very typical scenario. So, for example, they click on an ad on Facebook on their phone, and they browse on their mobile, and then they go and purchase on their desktop. So that user ID does help you in scenarios where the user's buying repeatedly, but it doesn't help you in that scenario where you just want to know for the first purchase what bought them there. So that's where the second one comes in, Google Signals. Now, Google Signals basically says if you're signed in to Google on a device, and obviously with Android, they have a huge number of mobile devices where users are signed in on, and also a huge number of people browsing in Chrome using Gmail and signed into Chrome. That's only I'm doing that right here, and you can see my little profile in the top here, say that I'm signed into Google. So you can take advantage of that huge device graph that Google have by opting into Google Signals. We need to do that under data settings and data collection again here. And what we need to do is to basically tell Google that we have the right privacy policy on our site to enable that. So we have to adhere to the advertising features policy and make sure that we've got privacy disclosures on our site to say that we will be using Google Signals. So here's the sort of flow to do it. As I said, new cross-device capabilities, so we can look at people browsing across different devices, more insights, and existing advertiser features. Blah 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 blah. I'm gonna activate. And there's a downside here, which is that Google wants to make sure that you can never use Google Signals to personally identify users. So if you turn on Google Signals, you may see some reports that are thresholded. If you're trying to look at very small slices of users, Google will try and protect identity by making sure that you can only have a sample of that report. So we've got some more settings here about we can allow it for different regions. There might be different. For example, you might decide in Europe you can't use Google Signals, but you can elsewhere. So that there's some granularity to that. But we've basically opted in, so that's great. So now we can go back to the reporting identity, and we can go back here, and we can see right now we're using Google Signals. Device ID is actually the standard way that Google Analytics is linking together user identity. So on every browser, there's a cookie identifier that we stored, and there are some limitations to that. I've just written a blog article I'll link to explaining how cookies are continuing to be used even as Chrome deprecates third-party cookies or starts blocking third-party cookies. And then finally, modeling. Now, modeling is basically using Google consent mode. This means that, for example, if a user has opted not to store a cookie and therefore Google can't use device ID as a way of linking them together, it'll try and fill in the gaps based on AI predictions. Again, not a lot of evidence about how this works, but as I said before, generally no downside. So to go back to the point, I would leave it unblended. I would try and make sure that you are using user ID where you can, and as I said, Littledata's tracking does enable that by default. I would definitely enable Google Signals. We see a big uptick, particularly for some brands, in their ability to attribute, basically do cross-device attribution of users browsing on one device and buying on another. Device ID is sort of standard anyway, and then model data may help you in areas, particularly if you're using consent mode or using the cookie banner, those sort of locations. Right. So to go back to attribution, data-driven, definitely. Make sure you can link the users together, and then from this point forward, not going backwards. This will affect all conversion revenue data. So when I go back to my reporting, and I go back to my user acquisition report, now from this point forward, users who come here, this split of revenue will be split across based on which campaign is most likely to have contributed to the sale. And as I said, there is some good articles that Google has about how data-driven modeling, data-driven attribution works. I can share those as well. But I think to finish off the live stream, I would say, look, the downside of data-driven attribution is it's a bit of a black box. The nature, I mean, this is true for a lot of AI-based products. The algorithm works out for you. You can't really know how that happens. Google just says, trust us. We've done the test, and this is robust. And it's important that it is measuring incrementality of the ad. So if, for example, as I said, go back to that example of branded search ads. They may look very, they may look high converting. I'm not saying you shouldn't do branded search, by the way. We do definitely sponsor our own brand name at Littledata. But what I'm saying is, it can be an illusion, because all that traffic, by the very definition, if they knew about your brand, they must have heard about you from another marketing channel. So that stuff, when last click, could all be getting the credit. Now, data driven will say, okay, let's look at these people saw a branded search ad, these people didn't, and they have a lot of different mix of other campaigns and products and stuff they saw. But let's just look at the difference between those two. And if there's no real additional incremental uplift in purchasing for the people, sorry, using the wrong hand, in that group saw the uplift. If there's no incremental uplift from those seeing the Google ads, then we won't credit with them, and we won't say that that's driving sales, because it isn't. So I do think that incremental marketing attribution is what's important, and I think Google's placed a very powerful product here that was previously only available in its Universal Analytics 360 into the hands of mid-sized brands. And so if you're in that category and you've got more than a few hundred orders a month, please take advantage of it. It's going to really help your judgment of what's causing people to purchase. Thanks very much for listening, and please tune in next week.